You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast, emergency breaking news that broke 36 hours ago, but I decided that we couldn't jump on straight away because I thought new information would emerge over the next 24 hours, and indeed that has been the case for Christian Horner being sacked from Red Bull. My initial guesses, which I'll go through, I think have been dispelled and replaced with other things. But we thought here at Missed Apex Podcast, we'd have a nice chat about it. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners. So let's be friends. Here to also speculate and guess to a lesser extent, because he actually does research and prep and stuff. It's Matt Two Rumpets. Hello, Matt.
Hello there from third place on the podium in our karting event.
Yes, you did. So I came first. Van Gien came second by 0.018. And he tried to say something about weight making it. I didn't catch it. I didn't listen. I was too busy celebrating and winning. But yeah, here at Missed Apex HQ, we're responding to the, I think, seismic news that Christian Horner, the longest serving, current F1 principal, has been sacked dramatically. And it's not nothing. This is a huge news story in Formula One.
Yeah, and so this is one of those things that it is going to carry on for a while, because you say it was a dramatic sacking, but that's the response to it. The actual sacking was about the driest, most corporate thing you have ever in your life seen, fully devoid of any real reasoning other than thank you for your service. Here's a watch. Well, enjoy whatever you do next.
Oh, so that's
actually, technically, he's still on contract. He's just been removed from operational duties.
So that's it. Thank you and good luck. Well, I don't recall saying good luck, but yeah, it was. He had basically found out the day before the news broke, and apparently had asked, "Okay, can I address everyone in the morning to tell them myself before it goes to the press?" And he gave, a pretty emotional speech, and by all accounts got a very long standing ovation from what I would imagine would be a quite stunned crew. And so, yeah, I mean, this podcast hasn't been filled with Red Bull fans or Christian Horner fans, but the people we've spoken to that have worked at Red Bull all rate him as a boss and all liked working under Christian Horner. So if nothing else, you can say he did inspire people to follow him. He did lead an incredibly successful Grand Prix team for 20 years.
Yeah, and this is the thing. When you get to talking about his record, there's a great deal of complexity in what he did with this team. But what is inarguable is the championships and the drivers that came through it. Vettel to Verstappen. What do you have? 7 drivers' championships and probably close to the same constructors' championships.
Eight drivers' championships and 6 constructors' championships. So all 4 with Vettel were doubles, and then obviously they didn't win the constructors in 21 or 24.
Right. So for a team that was Jaguar in 2005, well, there you go. And I apologize to the Americans for pronouncing it that way, but I literally just got back yesterday. So
okay, so I think here we should be going through our guesses of why it happened, and for that part of this podcast and this discussion, we know nothing. So, but that is kind of the fun thing that's been going around social media is guessing why we think it happened. And then, of course, I think we can then go back and dwell on what his effect on the sport has been. And indeed, it might not be over yet. So some options for the future, not only for Christian Horner, but what that means for Red Bull going forward. Now, my theory at the very beginning of this was, oh my goodness, he must have lost Verstappen. This was my theory. So I think we know almost for certain that Mercedes is interested in Verstappen and there's been negotiations. So my thing was, okay, he said to the board, look, stick with me. I've got Verstappen, I've got our own powertrain, and I've got a dream and a plan. And then they find out they lose Verstappen, and therefore, right, well, this team now going forward, you've lost your star driver. We weren't happy with you anyway, and you're sacked. That was my initial one. And then I was arguing with Kyle, who thought it was perhaps a hostile takeover from the Verstappens, who'd managed to finally get him ousted. And it's just interesting that in our discussion, me and Kyle both converted each other. So I finished up going, oh, they sacked Horner to keep Verstappen. And Kyle was going, oh, no, I think he's probably lost Verstappen, and that's why he got sacked. What was your initial take when the news dropped?
Well, you'd have to go with, and this was, I think, pretty much standard in all of the stories. The most proximate cause here would be the performance
Yeah.
of the car and Verstappen's release clause, in real danger of finishing in a position where he could leave the team for the first time in, well, ever since he's been on the team and had that clause. So this makes it very simple. But as the reporting began to percolate and more sources were gotten in touch with, there's sort of four main axes that we can look at. And you say we don't know anything, but the problem actually is we know rather a lot. What we don't have is anything definitive on the corporate side. But even there's some interesting stuff happened that we found out about that we'll talk later. And I just want to add, as we get into this, that it's not just Horner who's out the door here. Paul Smith, who was their comms director, and Oliver Hughes, who did marketing and commercial for him, his big buddies, his support team, his triumvirate within the team where all the power was concentrated at the top of the pyramid, also got the boot here. And kind of a long-running project and sort of fault lines that go all the way back to the death of Dietrich Mateschitz, really.
Oh, see, this is it. The thing that with the other staff being sacked makes you think that it isn't just sporting. Because wasn't one of them the comms director and one was HR?
Marketing and commercial. So he did the marketing side and like the commercial side, you know, where they take care of the sponsors and do stuff like that.
See, this is it. You should really say, look, it's sporting reasons. You've lost staff. Maybe you've lost your star driver. The engine project doesn't look like it's going good, and the championship both championships look to be gone for this season. Therefore, he's been sacked for sporting reasons. But then why would those two guys go with him? That to me, they go, yeah, we're struggling with the rear end and we're getting oversteer and understeer. Get me the head of marketing. He's got to go. That's why. And you go, no. This is clearly kind of clans. So we'd had a lot of speculation that they'd split into factions, and clearly head of comms and head of marketing were in the wrong faction. So when they finally got rid of Christian Horner, then they went as well. I suppose the question is, though, it's mid-season. Why now?
Well, I think this is a really interesting thing. It's officially said that Horner, quote unquote, slowly lost the trust of the Uvidjas, who I think the junior Uvidja is had the 51% shares in the company. And we found out that as of, I believe, May 20th, 2% of his shares had been put in a trust, which now meant it was equal between the Austrian side, the Dietrich Mateschitz side, and the Thai side. So that would certainly potentially change the voting if those shares were voting shares.
Yeah, so this has happened recently, right?
Yeah, May 20th of this year.
And there was reports that there was a meeting in Austria. And so that timing lines up, doesn't it? That does line up quite well. And so I think a little bit of the background here is, what did you say the name of the Thai family was?
It's the Uvijas, and I apologize, I can't bring the first name.
No. I think we can go with that. So, Daddy, so you say it again for me. Sorry.
So we'll just call them Senior and Junior.
Okay.
So when Red Bull was formed, Dietrich got 49%, Senior got 49%, and Junior got 2%. Now, when Senior died, obviously Junior inherited all of that, and when Mateschitz died, they took over, left the Austrian side, which was represented by Oliver Mentzloff, who is CEO of Corporate Projects and New Investments, which is the sports ball marketing thingy.
Okay.
In charge of the race team. But Horner impressed the Thais, said, look here, this is my project. I've done all these things. I need your backing if we're going to continue to be successful. And so they laid down and gave Horner the reins at the race team, but still left the Austrians in charge. And that was of 2022. And what has happened in the last month and a half is suddenly 2% of the Uvidja side has gone into a trust. Theoretically, possibly that makes the voting equal. But obviously what's really happened, for some reason, someone finally came up with something to put in front of them to say, okay, it is time to turn over a new leaf at Red Bull, and it was convincing enough that it's been agreed to.
Oh, so, well, I mean, we don't know what in trust means. So that 2% could have just been sold. And so we don't like we can go into conspiracies here. Like maybe the Verstappens clubbed together to get their rich friends to buy that 2%, and then they could hand that 2% voting share over to the Matashit's legacy shares. And you go, well, we don't know. They don't necessarily have had to have the Uwitia. Is that correct? Uwitia?
Uvidya?
So somebody has
Uvidya?
put WITT, but I think they might be a German speaker. So it's Uvidya. Anyway.
Uvidya.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So if somebody knows how to pronounce Thai better than me, and I don't know how to pronounce it at all,
Yeah, no,
then,
same.
Then thank you.
Absolute same. So, yeah, it's not necessarily that they've been convinced to get rid of Horner. This is how I'm feeling at the moment, is that side, maybe in league with the Verstappens, did want Horner out. And then now with this 2% moving to something more controllable or more persuadable, the control that 2% share might be in the hands or in the control of someone who's more likely to go, yeah, go on then. Yeah, go on then. Yeah, I know you've been after that for a while. I see it. I see what you're going at. Let's get rid of him.
Yeah, and essentially what this boils down to is two possible explanations. One, they convinced them, and they put the trust thing really doesn't have anything to do with it, other than not needing to be in control to protect Horner. They were free to move those shares where they wanted to move them, which was it's a trust in Switzerland. I forget, it's like a super high end wealthy individuals kind of thing. Or for completely unrelated reasons that had to be done, and suddenly this opened the door for the German side, because now they were on equal footing, to just go ahead and do this. The Austrian side, yes. To just go ahead and do this anyway, because there was no longer a way for Horner to be protected in a corporate voting war type scenario, which is the other possibility. But it doesn't seem that that's the case. And I think, like I said, there's four main axes. We can talk about power, we can talk about money, we can talk about performance, and we can talk about personal. And they all kind of interact with each other. But I suspect, in my heart of hearts, that it's got a lot to do with next year's car and where it actually is relative to where they were told it was going to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like the stuff at the beginning of 2024 is still hanging over everyone's heads. And obviously the Missed Apex lawyers are telling us to be very careful what we say around that. But you can't deny that the split seems to have come from the allegations and the internal Red Bull proceedings, which seem to have split Red Bull in half. And from what I've heard, Christian Horner's main staying power in Red Bull is his contract. And he has like an ironclad contract that's very hard to weasel their way out of. The performance clauses are relatively, good for him. You'd have to have your star driver and son of the person who's leading the opposing faction throw a bunch of results to trigger those clauses, wouldn't you? So I find the idea fascinating that perhaps there was performance clauses in Christian Horner's contract that were dependent on Max Verstappen performing, and he hasn't been able to get that haul of points. And I think they're sitting P3 in the constructors at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. And this is actually a great place to start, because at the end of the day, what has happened since 2022 is that he is not only the CEO of Red Bull Racing, he's the team principal, he's also head of power unit. And a couple of years ago, do you remember there was some talk, some rumblings that maybe what is now VCarb might just get sold off?
Yeah.
Well, apparently that was him telling Mintzlaff, look, either sell it or give it to me and I'll fix it. And he chose to do that and brought in Peter Bayer and brought in Mekis, ran up some commercial sponsorship deals for them. But now that they're doing better, Mintzlaff reportedly went to him and said, look, we want to give that leadership team some more freedom to do some of their own stuff. And in something that will become a bit of a recurring theme here, he refused,
Yeah, so
said no.
yeah, so we're getting the impression that Horner's not the best delegator and wants to be controlling a lot of different fields. So I didn't realize that Lauren Meckies was a Horner hire. And who was it before Meckies, who was there for a long time?
Oh, you're gonna embarrass my
No,
aged
I
memory
can't remember
here.
either. I can
Yeah,
see
no,
his
he
face.
was he was there for a long time,
Yeah.
possibly Italian, very, very good team principal. And I remember mostly because he got stuck with having Sainz Senior and Verstappen Senior at the same time. And it was a nightmare of a garage. And
Yeah.
he did a reasonable job of keeping them from literally killing each other.
Thank you, live chat. Great. Oh, that everyone knows, Matt. Well, how humiliation. Everyone knows it's Franz Tost. Everyone except us. But my suspicion was that it wasn't a true team principal CEO role. So now you've got Peter Bayer
Bayer.
as the
Yeah.
CEO, and then you've got operationally Lauren Meckies as team principal. But I feel like back then Tost was he was the principal to Horner and Marco's kind of CEO roles. So they were very hands-on. Marco would be giving instructions to the junior drivers who he controlled and brought on. And you just got this feeling that really the instructions to the team were coming from on high. Whilst they were saying, no, two entirely separate teams, nothing gets between us. And then it was around 22 when they started saying, oh, well, do you know what? We're going to share more parts. You have to have our rear suspension now.
Yep.
And then we're going to bring in this management team that I would imagine answered to Christian Horner. So yeah, go on, Matt.
Well, I was going to say, and this is the thing: when Toast was in charge, Marco was Dietrich Mateschit's personal, essentially fixer at both of the teams because this was Mateschit's project. But after his death, Horner actually took control of it and really, to an extent, iced Marco out of a lot of his previous roles. In fact, he somehow sneakily managed to insert a clause into Verstappen's contract that if Marco got fired, Verstappen would be a free agent. And a lot of people are surmising that's probably the only reason he's actually still around. Otherwise, Horner would have gotten rid of him.
That's interesting.
In his consolidation of control. And this is an espoused philosophy of his. He believes that the team runs best when all of the decisions, all of that runs directly to him in a very tight management structure, which is a perfectly reasonable theory. Although I'll point out that even Toto Wolff doesn't run Mercedes power units. It's an entirely separate division. And again, I feel like that has a lot to do with it because power units aren't cheap. But at the end of the day, if you look at the performance on track and you say, well, this is unacceptable. We've built a car that no one but Max can drive, and he can only drive it to fifth place most of the time. Who's in charge here? Well, it turns out Horner is literally in charge of all of it, and he's set it up that way, which means that if it goes wrong, well, you know exactly who to be looking for.
Difference in corporate structures there. So I guess, but I can use Mercedes as an example. I would bet that Toto Wolff's got his head of departments and he says, generally, I think we want this kind of thing. And the heads of departments will chat and go, yeah, we agree. That's the sort of thing we should go for. Okay, you department one, go and get me 34.7 giblets. You department two, I need an angle of 47 degrees on the flange, right? And they all go off with their requirements. And that's all Toto Wolff needs to know. They come back and they say, yeah, we have the correct amount of giblets, or we think we can actually only have this much. Can you manage that around the other departments? So it's a requirements-based style of management. And so he probably doesn't see a lot below his tier, his tree. And so the advantage of that is you remove a department head and you can replace them. The thing with Horner and how he's built up this structure, and this speaks to how it's going to affect Red Bull going forward, is if he's made himself kind of part of every department quite low down, has his tentacles and is effectively kind of the head of all these different departments, you take him out now and you're missing leadership in several areas. And I think pre-show, Matt, you were telling me that there's some kind of a hint about a leadership vacuum anyway at Red Bull.
Yeah, well, and this is part of the performance. There is the on-track performance, which is everybody is mostly going to know about. And if they didn't, we just basically told them what's happening. But there's also what's called the brain drain. In a very short period of time, you've lost Adrian Newey, Jonathan Wheatley, Will Courtenay, who was actually in court to leave and go to McLaren, Rob Marshall, who some people who may or may not be named Summers have hinted might have something to do with McLaren's current suspension success. And on top of that, like I said, like you said, read a very intriguing hint in the race that someone senior had told them as recently as the British Grand Prix, which was, I don't know, last weekend maybe, that with him in charge, essentially there's a leadership vacuum in the garage and among the engineering team. And if that's the case, then that does start to make more sense out of what we're seeing on track and why it's not getting better.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you remember when Dan Fallows left and we were having arguments about whether that would bring Aston Martin to the top? And I don't know if you said this. I think you maybe had speculated that perhaps Newey wasn't really the main power behind it. It was all Dan Fellows. And that seemed to fall apart quite a lot at Aston Martin. And then when Newey left for Aston Martin, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, do you know what? Actually, it's Pierre Vacher is the main person who designs it." Like, there's been so much retro demolishing of Adrian Newey's career, but Vacher is kind of under fire. I've seen a lot of things in the media saying he's unable to fix what's wrong with Red Bull at the moment, and it does feel like maybe they don't have this formidable technical team that they've had in years gone by.
Yeah, it does seem like that. And for all the names we've mentioned, you could add some zeros for the mid-level people that have also been departing over the last few years. So what has happened is you sort of got a bunch of people who have at the bottom of the ladder and the people at the top of the ladder, and they were able to hang it together. And now the people at the top are gone, and there's just not anyone to step into it. But also, as you well know, having had to work a real job at one point or another, that if your senior management is suffocating, it can be very hard to solve problems even when the solution is there, if you don't feel empowered to pursue it on your own.
Yeah, because you've always got to check in with the king to find.
Bingo.
Yeah, exactly.
But I have one more performance thing that I mentioned to you briefly.
Yeah, but if I don't say what I'm going to say, I'll forget it, which is...
Say it now.
That it doesn't matter why he left, in a way. But we can just certainly go, if it's performance related, then your point is valid. But I think the next thing I'm going to say is, I don't think it matters why he was fired.
No, and it kind of doesn't, except for, the show gets a lot shorter if we don't bother with that bit.
No, but I'm curious. I am curious. So to add to the argument that it might be performance related. So what have we got so far? We've got lost Verstappen. That's kind of related with performance related because it's a management thing.
You've lost the car on track. You've
staff.
lost the brains.
Yeah, bled staff. The other one was Verstappen clan takeover. But if we're going to enforce it's just because the performance wasn't good enough, what's the final performance thing you were saying?
And this was a surprise to me, but apparently they do regular fan surveys and they ask the fans who their favorite teams are. And apparently in the last few years, Red Bull has been turning up dead bottom. Or close to the bottom in least like teams, which, like I might not care about Formula One. I might have billions of dollars, but I'm running essentially a whole company that's based around marketing. And if I notice my Formula One team is no longer well liked, well, then maybe I can count that as a performance reason too. And because you were watching when they came into the sport, they were a breath of fresh air. Even when I started watching again, that's how they were described. They were the cool garage. They played the awesome music. They had parties like nobody else. They had the energy station. Everybody wanted to be Red Bull. And over the course of Horner's stewardship, that has inverted.
Tim Rudd in the live chat has just pointed out that the booing at the F1 launch event probably went down badly at a marketing company. And so, there was booing there. But, people will talk about British bias, but Britain, or the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is a big market in Formula One. It's been an important part of Formula One's history. Red Bull are not, I don't think, generally well supported in the UK. And it could be down to, well, British bias. They were fighting against British drivers, Vettel against Brawn and against Button, and then Vettel against Hamilton. And then you kind of go, well, also Hamilton was the main protagonist in 21. So that might have set some people against a Red Bull in general. But I think, like, even if you just look back without those factors, Red Bull hasn't been a massively supported team. McLaren, I think, overwhelmingly is the most supported team when I go to events and I'm asking people who they support. Obviously, we have to say we have a reputation for being not a Red Bull podcast and a Hamfosi podcast, even though I've been a supporter of 2 Red Bull drivers for the past 6 years. So massive fan of Tsunoda and Perez, but yeah, that's me anti-Red Bull. But I've not noticed a massive amount of UK support for Verstappen and for Red Bull, Verstappen being their star driver. And then in America, when we've done events there, again, they've been our audience. So, but then again, not much Red Bull support. But even in the stands, you go to Grand Prix and you look in the stands and it's overwhelmingly papaya at the moment. This may be different in Zandvoort and I've never been, but I can understand that. And I actually think that the stories from the beginning of last season are not in favor of people becoming Red Bull fans. It's certainly put a cloud over the team. I think they are seen as being a part of the institution. I think a lot of people associate them with having power and a little bit of influence with the FIA, which again is to Horner's credit. If you can get the governing body on your side, you should. Yeah, if you get an opportunity to have a massive influence within the governing body, then you should. You should do that. But I think it has led to an overall decrease in the popularity of the team.
Yeah, and this actually, I'm going to go back to our power struggle between the Verstappens, because I had a couple of quotes, and I really like this one from Jos, because I think it illustrates what's happened to the team. It can't go on the way it is. It will explode. This is last year after the allegations. He is playing the victim when he is the one causing the problems. And I think that has become kind of he's inculcated a very much everyone is against us attitude at the team, and embraced both causing trouble and then being the victim whenever he's accused of anything. When I say he, I mean he as the team itself. But people see that and they don't respond well to it. And I think that it has certainly been part of it. The other thing I will say.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to get in on that quickly because it's hard for me to tell, because obviously I was on one side of, say, in 2021, I was cheering for one side and it wasn't Christian Horner's side. So it's hard for me to go, well, is that just playing badly with me because that was the other team? But it did seem quite, aggressive and gaslighty. And when things happened in front of our eyes, well, we can all see that. And they go, no, come on. And he'd do it in such a charming way. Oh, well, drivers are always dropping anvils on people's heads since the beginning of time. What's a little anvil dropping between friends? And I think that kind of didn't play well. He might even be right. By truth, he might be right. We're just talking about whether it played well with audience. And I think a lot of the stuff that came out in 2021 didn't play well to TV viewers. They're also pointing out in the chat that, Sydney, hello, Sydney, says Drive to Survive made Red Bull more villainous. And Race Control, Richard says, no, Red Bull made Red Bull more villainous. But, the Drive to Survive was a huge charm campaign for Red Bull and the Horners. They featured heavily on it, and that didn't seem to have an impact.
Yeah, and perhaps it was the elaborate staging, perhaps it was the perhaps unaware, but the ostentatious wealth display, which is unavoidable, and not, by the way, the only player in the Drive to Survive universe that did sort of get the Mr. Evil treatment a little bit, even if unintentionally, even if they were working very hard to get around it. But it does kind of bring up sort of an interesting note of speculation, which is, What do you think Drive to Survive is going to do about this?
Oh yeah, that is a genuine thing. Obviously, we're not massive Drive to Survive viewers at this point because it's not quite aimed at us. But if they've invested a lot of time in the story, I think that they'll just run with it. I think they will run with the story of that sacking. Now, you'll remember that the beginning of this year, they did cover the allegations. So they did cover the allegations, but they basically went, yeah, here's the allegations. He's under fire. He was completely cleared of it. And that was how Drive to Survive covered it. So I think they will just run with the tape they've got. So sometimes you go to an event, don't you, to try and video stuff. And as me and Matt know, that you don't always get the footage that you think you were going to get. We had one cat, I'll say.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah,
me.
go on. No, it's someone's fault. But in the Alex is going to hate this because he just messaged me saying when's the live event footage getting released.
Yeah.
We ended up, the camera that was on Alex was turned to the audience. So we've got a rear camera that catches him from the back, and we've got one wide camera at the far end, which covers him only when one particular person moves their head out of the way to like eat crisps or whatever. So to some extent, you just have to go with whatever footage you got. And I imagine Drive to Survive will just roll with it, and they'll cover the sacking, and they'll now have to maybe even cover, if he's meant to be the star of Drive to Survive like he has been in previous seasons, they might even try and follow him on his next adventure, which is quite possibly Alpine. So I guess that's the question. Live chat. What do you think of Christian Horner and... hang on, I shouldn't say that. What do you think his legacy is in Formula One? What will he be remembered for? And what will he do going forward? Where are we going to see him prop up next? So first guess I'll take from Matt Trumpets. In fact, I'll ask you that question. You know, if this is it, if he's out of F1, how do you think he'll be remembered, you know, in the annals of history?
I think he's going to be remembered as someone who was a very gifted team principal who took a brand new team and built it into a dominant powerhouse, not once, but twice. Worked with at least one generational talent on the level of Hamilton when I came in and started watching the sport. And someone who had probably some difficult individual flaws. I know he was cleared by the team. I will point out, just hanging off in the distance, there is an employment tribunal, I believe, coming up at the end of January in 2026. So this story is not entirely done. And I think in the long term, people are going to be like, you know what? It's a shame that what happened after Mateschit's death happened, because if that power balance had been better maintained, they would be a more formidable team, and we would probably witnessing an epic duel for the drivers and the constructors championship between Red Bull and McLaren this year. And we've sort of been denied it.
We've got the live chat here. We've got EJ saying Sky Broadcast might be his next move. And I don't know. I honestly, if we were to do like an approval rating like you do for presidents and prime ministers, I don't think Christian Horner's approval rating is going to be that high. I don't think that'll be a very popular hire. I might be wrong. Look, there might be like massive Christian Horner fans out there, and he is probably the most successful team principal of all time. I think he is. And so, you know, Armando says he'll be remembered as one of the best team principals in history, which I think is fair. And I have to say, it's not just doing it once. Anyone can have a run in Formula One. It happens, a regulation set. He's done it twice. He's made 2 quadruple F1 champions. You know, he's made the teams that gave Vettel his 4 championships and Verstappen his 4 championships as well. And when they weren't winning championships, we were often on this pod here, we were talking about how Red Bull was still a dangerous team, the best developers in the sport, the best operationally, the best pit stops. They were disruptors. They would throw out strategies that would make other teams stop and think. And you can't really extract Red Bull from Christian Horner. It's the only team principal they've ever had up until now. And therefore, that success is Christian Horner's success. He's done it multiple times. I don't know if there's another team principal who's had that level of success over different regulation sets.
You'd have to go back if you wanted to find that, because certainly in the modern era, that's not the case. Although we've got 2026 coming and Mercedes is out there, so I guess Toto could also pull this off. I like Mike Hatfield's characterization. Accomplished leader had a steep fall from grace, and I think that adequately covers it in a very poetic sort of way. And he does, and it's also been brought up in the chat, and this is sort of makes a nice transition to talking about the money side of things. One of the biggest deals that they tried to bring in the door was Porsche. Do you remember this? Porsche was going to be their works. Porsche wanted to take 50% of the race team to walk in the door. And Horner absolutely skunked that deal because he did not want to give up control. And that was when they were champions. So who knows what that 50% would have been worth. So that's a power thing, but it is also very much a money thing. And with the death of Mateschitz, it was inevitable that the former Red Bull team that were just freewheels and Mateschitz could do with them as he chose, that they were going to eventually get drawn in and under a corporate structure. And so this collision was kind of inevitable.
Jason 8 says 8 drivers, world championships, and the best team principal in the history of the sport. I don't think we'll see him back in F1 again. Aaron says, obviously going to Aston Martin. Newey and Horner, dream team, back together again. Erica says he'll be remembered as a petty winner. I don't know if that's a typo. Hopefully nowhere in the paddock. Seriously. Steve says he'll be remembered for turning a very good team into a bit of a cesspool. Tim Rudd, he'll end up at Alpine or the 12th team. We've had a few votes for Alpine here as well. So we've had Yar saying whoever will buy Alpine will bring Horner with him. So that's an interesting option, and that's certainly something I've seen buzzing around on the internet. Sydney suggests that he could be a future podcast guest. No one tell him about any of the stuff we've said over the past 11 years.
Although, could you imagine getting him and Carter on at the same time?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to just be not on the show, I think, is what you're saying. A lot of people suggesting Ferrari next. Although I've seen reports that Ferrari were interested in him around the time of Fred Vasseur, but the cloud of last season is enough to make them not interested at this time, is what I've seen.
It's a funny old thing. He looks like a great get until he's summarily kicked out. And then suddenly you ask yourself, wait a minute, what have I missed in my due diligence? I think of the teams that are out there that I've seen mentioned, which would be, it was Cadillac, Audi, the new ventures, Alpine and Ferrari. I don't see either of the new teams wanting him just for optical reasons. The fastest growing segment in Formula One new viewers is actually, I believe, young women. So that just probably is going to be off limits for a bit till everything settles down. I'm not saying, again, allegations, nothing proven, it's still absolutely going to be optically not something they want to do. Ferrari, he did talk to Elkan, but now he's damaged goods because he's been fired. So that's probably, they might look elsewhere. Alpine, on the other hand, is run by Briatore, himself some very damaged goods. Horner is a good team principal. And I think what would seal the deal here is that he could probably get shares in the team, which is also something that he wanted in Red Bull that they were not giving him, and another source of sort of internal friction here.
Yeah, if those allegations had never come to light and that wasn't ongoing and he had just been sacked for sporting reasons, I think you look around and there's a lot of teams. I think there's a lot of teams who go, okay, he can do a job. Like, he's very clearly good at running an F1 team. Or maybe he couldn't run every F1 team. Maybe he couldn't go into Mercedes structure and do it. He would find it too restrictive. He wouldn't have time to get all the information he wanted. there'd be department. He'd have to really shake things up and change the whole philosophy of the team. But there's plenty of teams that probably wouldn't mind a Horner team or like a Haas. Go in there at stake and take control of every single aspect of it. People might well appreciate that. And you go Cadillac, and Cadillac needs someone high profile, probably. Graham Loudon, who's coming in with Cadillac, he was the Marussia team boss, right? And
Yeah.
working with very little, and I'm sure did an amazing job. But nobody outside of that team is like, oh, here comes the Loudon crew. But if you had Horner, people are going to write inches and inches and inches of column space about that. So he's an asset. Well, this is it. Without this cloud that we're talking about, which, let's be completely fair, there has not been a decision or a judgment either way in a court of law. Without that, he'd be very employable now.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. And that's why you really do have to be careful when you're talking about assessing things to sort of separate out the sort of the lived reality, which is, let's face it, if something like that comes up in this era, that's going to be something massive brands with billions of dollars of marketing are going to be very sensitive about. And it's problematic for him, and it limits his options. I think pretty massively. And I know some people are saying the 12th team, but that's an Otmar Safnauer project. So you can only guess who's going to be running it if they get the money and approval to actually come join the sport.
Here's the thing. I don't suspect that Christian Horner is interested in a job. So I don't think that he's going to come in and be like, right, you're going to be the head of catering at Steak. Do you know what I mean? Or you're going to be hired as our team principal, and here's your tasks, here's your performance. I don't think he's going to do that. I think if he comes back in, it will be a project, which was pretty much, yeah, of course he's got his paymasters and stuff, but that's pretty much how he came into the sport. That was very much a Christian Horner-led adventure. So I think that if he comes back, it will be a project. Like him and Briatore get together, buy a team. Briatore runs the business side. Christian Horner as CEO, appoint a team principal, and that might be the next adventure for Christian Horner. My concern then, if you're a Red Bull fan, is that whatever you think of Christian Horner, and for me, it's as if he's like an enemy of my sporting favourites because he's the managing and providing the team for my sporting rival. He's really, really good at that. Like, he's been an excellent team principal, and you've just sacked him, possibly for non-sporting reasons. By doing that, you have chosen whatever beef you have, or whatever, if it's a moral stand or whether it's a tribal stand, you've chosen to sack him for non-sporting reasons. You've now got a massive hole to fill for sporting reasons. And it does feel a little bit like, I'm sure Lauren Mekis is great, but they have grabbed the team principal they have to hand. That is not necessarily someone who's going to come in with the same style as Horner, who's going to have the same ability, the same weight when it comes to talking to the FIA and media, the same pull when it comes to marketers, brand deals. That's all part of the job because he's CEO as well. With no offense at all to Lauren Mekis, this decision has weakened Red Bull, right?
And this is the thing. Like, he was already actually, Horner was already talking about life after Max. Horner was already talking in terms of cycles of building and destruction and rebuilding before this happened. What you get with Mekis is someone who has technical knowledge, someone who is simply a safe pair of hands, as we often like to say in this world. With Alan Permane, I think formerly from Renault and moving up to take over at V-Carb. And what you've essentially got is the Red Bull German, the Austrian side, saying, okay, we are now a business. Before you were a one-man adventure, and you adventured yourself slightly too close to the sun. And, we gave you enough rope and you did that thing that we thought you were going to do. So now we're going to put technocrats in charge. We're going to spend money on staff. And, we're going to hope and pray that by year 2 or 3, Ford gets their act together enough to give us a decent power unit. Because he has cost them a lot of money very recently. And I know we talked about the Porsche deal, but let's talk about eating the Perez salary.
Yeah. Go on, explain.
Because they had to buy Perez out of that contract after he couldn't drive the car anymore, and Christian wanted to make a change. He wanted Ricardo. Ricardo couldn't make it, and that whole thing probably cost money too. Then he's like, "Oh yeah, Lawson. He showed me what we need to see." That lasted 2 races, and then Tsunoda. All of that is money and doesn't look great for the company. And on top of it all, he sort of let Honda. Honda wanted to leave, but then they wanted to come back. But he was like, no, we're going to build our own power unit. And let me just tell you, it's kind of hard to find numbers on building power units. But I did find an article that estimated that for the 2014 power unit, total development costs from when Mercedes started that engine to 2018 were $1.4 billion. Now, Red Bull did not have the facilities to build an engine when this started, and they had 2 years, maybe 3 years before the cost cap came in. And they had to invest all of that in facilities. It's been a lot of money he spent, and they're not necessarily going to get a great power unit out of it. They could have maybe just brought Honda back in.
Yeah. And I think Honda are a bit upset now, aren't they?
And instead, Stroll's like, oh no, actually, you think you want back in? Oh, come with us. I have so much money, and I'll let you do anything you want. And it just, I think he just got a little too isolated from reality and began to believe his own PR slightly too much. But even if you just look at the money side, I think that alone, those decisions alone in that period of time, any manager would be having to seriously defend themselves.
Erica says, if Red Bull is already in a downward spiral, how does keeping him equal stability? Well, here you go. He's in a downward spiral because he's fighting a faction. He's fighting an internal war. So you could clear out the Verstappens. You could clear out, who is it, the Oliver?
Mintzlaff.
You could clear out the Austrians, couldn't you? And then go, right, let's throw it behind Horner because he knows what he's doing. And then you enable him to bring in those the kind of staff he wants that aren't actively against him. That would be some way. I think there'd be more stability in keeping Horner than there would be if Max leaves. I think if Max left, good drivers are really important, right? But at the end of the day, it is the car. So if he's struggling to hire technical people, or he's bleeding people because of other factors outside of sporting factors, and he's not getting that support, then putting your weight behind him, if he's able to turn that around and provide a race winning car, you could have drivers that are 95% of Verstappen's ability, build a car that suits both of them, and then do actually better in the Constructors' Championship and earn more money. And so, yes, there is star power behind a driver as well. Engineers are more likely to come and work with Max Verstappen than they are with Hadjar at the moment. That's just a reality. However, ultimately, drivers are replaceable. Like Horner has done this with Vettel. Horner has done this with Verstappen. It's possible that Horner could have done it with another superstar driver down the line.
Yeah, and if you have the car and you have the facilities, if you have the money and you're finishing top 5 on the regular, well, think about the drivers who would happily go there. You could easily have Sainz go there. Leclerc, you could probably steal him. I mean, there are some extremely good drivers that would happily go there. I think the problem for Horner is that he failed ultimately to deliver the car. If he had delivered a car that was similar to the one he had last season and relative performance to McLaren, do you think Verstappen would be thinking about leaving?
No, but I also don't buy that you sack a team principal in F1 after one bad season.
But it's been a downward spiral. He's been complaining as long as, when was the last time Perez won? First race of 2023? And then they brought that update and Perez couldn't drive the car anymore.
Yeah.
He's been, Max has, and this is one of the things I discovered in sort of reading through all the articles, is No, he defended Perez. He defended Lawson. He defended Tsunoda. He's saying, look, guys, this car is impossible to drive, and you're not hearing me. You're not fixing the things I want fixed. And instead, and it makes it impossible for anyone else to drive the car. And that's been a longer arc.
Sure. And I do not want to overly defend Christian Horner, but if you have a team that's completely split and you've got parts of that team that are actively pushing against you, which he did have, like that's got to contribute to the downward spiral as well. After 18 years, he suddenly forgot how to manage a race team. That seems unlikely, like unless he's massively distracted in some other way. He didn't go from knowing how to build a successful team multiple times to suddenly just forgetting how to do it all. I think half that team, half that management structure didn't want him there. And that shows with the fact that 2 other staff members got fired, that there's a Horner loyalists and there's Red Bull loyalists. And I bet they started wearing slightly different versions of the Red Bull uniform going forward. And so in that way, I think the sporting performance can be put down to the team as a whole being fractured rather than Horner just forgot how to build a race-winning team.
No, I mean, he knows how to build a race-winning team, but I think he overestimated his abilities. He underestimated the contribution of the people who were leaving, and he did not have people in place who could step up and successfully fill those roles, whether it was the structure he imposed after Mateschit's death, or whether it was just a longer term because Red Bull was always seen as just, the insistent poaching that all of the teams would have done because they were seen as being that successful. They were the champions for 3 years in a row. So you want to steal their personnel to gain their knowledge. This is a normal Formula One thing. He got caught out there one way or the other. He got caught out on the budget side, money side. And at the end of the day, this is actually, I'm going to bring up a weird analogy because it happened here in the US and I know it happened in the UK too. It's like owning a house and then the market drops out and suddenly you've got negative equity in the house.
Huh.
If you sell it, you lose money and you can get caught in a credit crunch that way. And I feel like in terms of the total team politics and everything that's happening, I feel like that's the case. He just got caught in a crunch he couldn't talk his way out of. And it was a large number of factors involved in that.
Okay. So Mekis goes from team principal to CEO and team principal. That's right, isn't it? That's correct.
Yes, he's been kicked upstairs to the big team and is essentially taking over the Horner role, but he's a much more Stella kind of a guy, which is the other model. We're seeing this model with Io, Komatsu, Haas.
Well, that's the example I was going to say, because that's from an engineering point of view. And it's like the Bonotto model, isn't it? So he's like a Bonotto, Komatsu, or a Mekis. So he's come from like a technical side, and it's like you almost don't want that role in a CEO. Have we had people like that do the CEO role? To me, he doesn't seem like he's a Zach Brown, a Toto Wolff, a Christian Horner, a Flavio Briatore. These are the guys that other teams have in that CEO role. So at Ferrari, it's John Elkann. Is he the CEO at Ferrari?
No, Benedetto Vigna, I believe, is. Elkann is like chairman of the board.
Right, okay.
He's the Fiat guy.
So we don't have, spanner turners up there in that CEO position. So it does feel like a bit of a hasty appointment. Like, I'm sure he's a great team principal, but you had Peter Bayer there to pull across if you needed help.
Right. Well, Bayer is staying at VCarb with Alan Permane, as far as I know right now. I would imagine that Menslav, who's the Red Bull CEO, will sort of temporarily take care of that till they find they're either going to bring in a comms guy and a marketing guy to essentially do that part of the job.
One. Who else did they sack?
But there are plenty of very talented people out there who would happily go and work for Red Bull. But I suspect you'll see a little bit more of a Marco presence too. Because he is, after all, let's not forget, one thing I had always meant to mention was that the main reason Verstappen wound up at Red Bull was because of Marco. He was like the Niki Lauda to the Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes. And that's also part of why he was able to stick around. He was Mateschit's person. But also, he was the one who could always say, well, look, Max is here because of me. And Max would be like, yeah, actually, that's right. So, be nice to him.
Okay, well, I mean, good luck to Lauren Mekies, who, by all accounts, is nice and seems nice. Strong beard game. Doesn't look like your average kind of CEO, washing around, Rolexes dripping off of him, massive suit and tie, high fashion guy. He seems like someone you would find in an engineering workshop with a team top on. So yeah, good luck to him as an individual. I don't know if we want to go into what that means for VCarb, Visa Cash App. There's probably less of a shake up there.
It's not going to make any difference. Permain's going to walk in the door if Bayer's still there. The team that's already in place knows what they're doing. Developments are done. They're onto the 26 car. And Permain is also someone with a great deal of Formula One experience at multiple teams at reasonably high levels. He'll be fine. I'm not worried about them. They actually have a decent car, and they have two drivers who can actually mostly drive it.
So Mekies is going to have to make some changes, though. He's going to have to go in there and go, who do I want as my technical lead? That's going to be the first big decision he has to make. And he's going to be able to see like what Tsunoda's doing in the car, and he'll know. He knows how good Tsunoda is. And when he goes in there and goes, that's impossible for Tsunoda to drive. Or I think he's much more likely to want it to be even. I don't know, because that's, he was good to Tsunoda. So, and he rated Tsunoda.
Yeah, I mean, he knows them from having been their team principal. And in a way, that's going to be very helpful because he'll understand how to take the feedback, maybe, and with the technical staff they do have, and sort of help optimize the car so that it's more balanced. But mostly, all you got to do is sit down and say, okay, Max, what do we need to fix on this car? And then you go to your technical staff and say, okay, what can we do between now and the end of the season to improve it in these areas? These are our priorities, and how much money do we have? And then you just got to make sure that whatever's baking for 26 comes out the oven fully formed.
There's conversations going up and down the paddock now as every head marketing guy at the other F1 teams are going, seems like a pretty good time for a pay rise, boss. And you've probably also got all the technical leads as well going over there going, Vache's taking some slack. It's a new chief over there. Maybe I hand my CV in. Maybe I take a wander over to the Red Bull garage. And so, yeah, interesting times ahead in Formula One. I think in the short term, Red Bull are in a little bit of trouble for the rest of the season. This is not healthy for Red Bull. It looks like the power unit, by all reports, is going to be not the best power unit for next season as well. So if I was the Verstappens, I would, just for the power unit alone, I'd be looking for a way out. And because you're Max Verstappen, and because you're the best driver in F1 at the moment, and because you've got the best reputation and you're world champion, you get to talk to Mercedes. And of all the drivers in the paddock, the one who gets to talk to the team who are fancied to be the runaway best car next season, you're the one that gets to talk to them because you've earned that. And this is why we say the greatest of all times. They've done it with different teams. All the people in the greatest of all time conversation, they've done it with different teams. And it's not necessarily, although it is down to it, that they are drivers who could just do it with any team. It's far more that the best drivers are wanted by the best teams. And those conversations come together. Attractive people hook up. So the best teams will speak to the best drivers, and that will end up being the pairing. And that's why these drivers in the greatest of all time categories end up winning multiple titles with multiple teams across multiple eras. I think Mercedes and Verstappen is the mega match for next season. Verstappen gets signed with Mercedes. I don't think anyone's putting a bet on anything other than a Verstappen world title. And then he gets his multiple titles with multiple teams, and he joins that greatest of all time conversation as well. And I think he's better off. He's better off there because it does look like the wheels have truly come off the wagon. At Red Bull, Matthew Trumpets, you're at MattPT55 on Blue Sky on Instagram. That's your street address, is at MattPT55 as well.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
What have we left off? Because I think we're gonna get out of the shed now and go and see our families. But what have we missed? I think a lot of the live chat have joined late and they've said why now. I think for me the why now is to do with that 2% I don't know the exact
Share
details,
being put
but
into
yeah,
trust.
that
Yeah.
2% share has to be vital. So it's something that a lot of the shareholders have wanted to do for a long time, and now they're finally able to do it. That's the why now. I think the Verstappen link having anything to do with it was a bit of a red herring, and we got that wrong on the TikToks. It might affect where he goes next. But yeah, I think, it's been a fascinating story.
It really has, and it's a look at how even the best and brightest can easily go astray in this kind of an environment. And it's also, I think, it's a tribute to how difficult it is to take a team of that many people and with that complex a business model and really just have it run harmoniously. So yeah, when you see it, acknowledge it and respect it. And I think if I leave people with anything, I would say that no. Was Red Bull my favorite team? No. Was Turner my favorite team principal? No. But never, not once, for the team and for the drivers, did we lack any respect for what they achieved on the track. And I just, for everyone who thinks we hate Red Bull, that's not the case. We respect absolutely what they do on track, and some of us might even like some of their drivers. I love Hadjar. I mean, isn't he so much fun?
I've been a fan of Red Bull drivers for years and years and years, and I tell you what, look, sport is all about sporting rivals, and they're an immense and beastly sporting rival to have.
And with this change, with this sea change now, the whole culture of the team might open up and invite people back in a way that hasn't seemed to be the case previously.
And since it is very, very hot in both our studio offices here, I will curtail my normal outro and just say, until we see you next, bye. Oh, sweet fan. Sweet, sweet cooling fan.